Early last year, I left a senior engineer position in a good company to start working on a project that I had been dreaming about for a long time. Besides being harder than I imagined, the process of building a startup can also be lonely. So, I've decided to invite folks from Y Combinator Startup School to join me live every Saturday here on my YouTube channel. My name is Rodrigo Tomaz. This is the Startup School Jam, and my guest today is Ben Cheng with his startup Intervallum Studio. Hey Ben, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Well, I'm Ben. I'm the CEO of Intervallum.
So Ben, here's how I'd like to roll. I will ask you to do like a quick introduction about yourself, maybe your background, your career, where you are located. But let's not talk about your startup right now because I will try to do a pitch about your startup for you later in a few minutes. Does that sound
Yeah,
all right? So let's do
sounds
it.
good. So,
Let's do it. So
yeah, so you wanted me to talk about my background, my career, and what else you want me to talk about?
yeah, I mean everything you believe can be interesting for us to know
Yeah,
about. And then of course we'll go over the startup, the your what you're building and everything as soon as we know you better.
sure. Yeah. Well, of course, I'm Ben. I was born and raised in Hong Kong, and I moved to the States when I was 14. I moved to California, very small town called Yuba City. Um, Well, hope your viewers know where Yuba City is because no one, no one in California even heard of it. So there's that. And then when I was about 20 years old, 21, 22, I decided to move to Utah because a few of my friends moved out here just for friends and schools. And then halfway through school, I dropped out. Just not a material for college. And then I joined a coding boot camp here in Lehi, Utah. And it's it's a boot camp called Bottega. They taught me how to write code. I learned React and Ruby on Rails, and then after that, I've been working for startups or with startups for the last almost 6 years now. I love the startup culture. Yeah, and that's what my journey is. And I I got to work with them, and then I wanted to do my own thing. So that's why I started Intervallum Studio.
Oh, that's awesome. So it sounds like you are a startup professional, really. So you have all the required background, right? Drop out, move away from family.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That sounds like exciting. So well, I think if I'm not mistaken, you are married now, right? So you no longer live with friends.
I no longer live with friends. My wife and I got married last June. So our first year anniversary is coming up in less than 2
Oh,
months. Yeah,
congratulations.
I'm still here in Orem, in Utah, called a city called Orem, Utah. So yeah,
There we go. Well, sounds great. Sounds Thanks for sharing this.
yeah,
And so let me see if I understood Intervallum Studio correctly.
sure.
So Intervallum Studio it's building a video game that aims to educate people to understand other cultures, and in this case specifically Chinese culture, right?
Hmm.
You guys are building a video game,
Hmm.
but Intervallum Studio, it also works for other companies, so it provides services to other companies as well.
Yes,
Does that sound
yes.
correct? That's actually based on what we talked a little bit
Mhm.
yesterday, and also by, doing some research on your
Mhm.
online resources. That is what I understood about Intervallum Studio. So feel free to please to do your own pitch now, and let's
Yeah,
understand what Intervallum Studio is correctly.
for sure. Well, what Intervalum Studio, our dream is to create. fun, entertaining games that would help people improve or learn a new like subject. And our dream is to become the next generation, next level of Oregon Trail. I don't know you heard of the game Oregon Trail before, but it was such a popular games in the 70s all the way to the early like mid or early 90s. Every kids played it in school.
Mm,
It was like the go-to game for kids to play in
mhm.
school. And that kind of died off after the late 90s. And we want to bring it, I wouldn't say bring it back, but we want to make it to become the next level, next generation of educational game. And
Interesting.
that's what we're
Well,
aiming for.
I'm, um, of course, everybody kind of can understand, can notice I'm not American. I have like a accent. I'm from Brazil originally, so I'm not really familiar with this game that you just mentioned. Can you explain a little bit how it works or how it used to work?
Yeah. So Oregon Trail was the what it calls it was a grandfather of educational game. They were one of the first video game that that have educational
Mm-hmm.
purposes for children, and they were teaching children how to manage resources correctly, especially the story setting were in the 1800s, early 1800s of the pioneers, American pioneers crossing the tracks in the Midwest all the way to Oregon, the state of Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the game is. It's about a group of pioneers. You have an X amount of low amount of resources, and you try to move to one place. And the end goal is that you survive through the journey, walking from Midwest all the way to Oregon.
Huh, that's interesting. And that was a video game, not like a board game or anything. It was
Not a board game,
like a
it was a video
Nintendo
game.
game or whatever.
Sorry,
It was like a Nintendo game or what console do you remember?
it was a PC game. I think it was on Mac or on
All
PC.
right.
So yeah, every kid's played it when they're in public history class or computer class back in the days.
So based on what I saw on your blog, it does sound like you are really following this path, right? Like building, because in your video game, what you guys are planning is to show the history from China and
Yes.
when they moved to California for the gold rush. Is that correct?
Yes. So our game, it's called the Forgotten Trails.
Mm-hmm.
That's the series, the title of the series. We
Mm-hmm.
want to make more than one game in the future, but um, Forgotten Trails. Oh, I almost forgot the title of the game. Forgotten. Um,
Well,
uh,
the name is very
yeah,
suggestive, huh? Forgotten Trails.
I was like, oh, what's the name of Forgotten Trails is the title of the series, and the title of the game is Heart of the Transcontinental West. And what happened is that is a Chinese cultural learning game that inspired by Oregon Trail and Okami and another Japanese game back in early 2000s. What happened is that it's the historical background would be around the 1800s between China and US, and what happened is that the user will take on the role of a Chinese immigrant in search for new opportunity for themselves and for the family.
Mhm.
And they will go through the struggles during the war-torn China and the gold rush and the transcontinental railroads events here in the States. So they're going to learn a lot about history that are less taught in the American school system.
All right. So that's an RPG, right?
Yes, it is an RPG
RPG
game.
game with a lot of information on the screen. And if
Yeah.
understood correctly, it's designed in Mandarin right now. So it's intended for people who can read or speak
Yes.
Mandarin. Traditional, or I think you mentioned something like basic Mandarin or something like that.
Mhm. So at this moment, our early adopters are Chinese speakers.
Mm-hmm.
What that means is it could be native, it could be American-born Chinese
Mm-hmm.
here, or they call it heritage learner. They learn it from their parents or their grandparents, or people that took classes from all the way from kindergarten to university, that they have years of experience of Chinese. Those are the early adopters right now. Um, and the game at the early stage will be in Chinese. It will be the voiceover will be Mandarin,
Mm-hmm.
and the reading will be in traditional or simplified Chinese characters.
Uh-huh. Oh, that.
And there will be pinyin underneath the Chinese character. And what the pinyin is, it's the romanization of Chinese. So that's how foreigners learn how to speak Chinese.
All right, all right. That's good for to me because I actually have zero knowledge of Chinese. So that's thanks for sharing. That's good. And you mentioned early adopters. It means you have users already.
Well, we have people that like the idea. We do not have users at the
Mm,
moment. Our game is still in preparation phase. We're doing a lot of animation, doing a lot of testing. We do not have any users at the moment.
all right. And what have you built so far? What product do you
What?
have?
Yeah. So what happened is that this idea is only like 2.5 months old. So we build a simple demo using RPG Maker.
Mm-hmm.
But what we found is that it doesn't convey the message that we wanted to convey,
Mm-hmm.
because we want to be more authentic Chinese art. And RPG Maker is just a silly generic tool to create a game.
Mm-hmm.
So what we made is some art pieces. They're 2D art pieces that it's on our idea page,
Mm-hmm.
and we're creating 3D models of these two characters, the main characters. And then we created a simple demo. We're still doing it. Me and my co-founder, Chris, are creating another demo that's using Unreal Engine. So it's still in the works right now. We'll probably have something out within 2 weeks.
All right. That's quick. Two
Yeah,
weeks.
without the animation, without the arts.
Oh, without it. All right. All
Without
right.
the arts. Yeah, the art is the hardest part because neither of Chris and I are artists.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So we're learning how to build the art from
I
scratch.
see. All right. So I captured like three information you threw in this conversation. RPG Maker, the art pieces in 3D models, and I think you mentioned something like Real Engine or Unreal Engine.
Yes. Yes.
So it's Real Engine, how it's called.
It's Unreal Engine.
Unreal. All right. So we'll go back to it in a few seconds.
Yeah,
Let me ask you first. Uh,
sure.
for myself and eventually possibly for people who watch this conversation, we don't know what RPG Maker is. I understand it's like a tool you can build a video game. Can you explain a little bit about it, how it works? Is it like a
Sure.
website? Is it like a software you install on our computer? What is that?
So yeah, RPG Maker is a software that allows anyone to create a role-playing game,
Hmm.
like a classic Japanese role-playing game. A very simple. It's almost, I don't know, that's the right term. I think it's almost like a pixel art, um, and then you can just do drag and drop. There's no code needed.
Mhm.
It's very simple. Anyone, a 10-year-old could build their own RPG game, and they can put things together. You can fight monsters. You can build all of that
All
stuff.
right, that's
Pretty cool tool for anyone that wants to make a simple RPG game.
mm-hmm,
It's free. It's free for a few weeks.
mm-hmm,
I don't know how much it costs if it's paid.
uh-huh. That sounds like fun. That's
It's very
that's
fun. Yeah.
interesting. And there is a link to your blog in the description
Mm.
of this conversation. And there is like a video you guys made of a video game. So that was built on um, RPG Maker.
Yes. That was built on RPG
All
Maker,
right,
and that was done in like less than 2 hours.
interesting.
It was, yeah.
But
We just want to show what can. what we were trying to do.
And that builds into like a PC game or an online game?
Are you talking about the RPG big maker?
Yes, because
Yeah,
once you build like a game, someone needs to play it, right? So that builds
yes,
to what?
yeah. So our game, it's a single player game.
Mm,
It's on PC or Mac.
mm-hmm,
We want to compile down to
mm-hmm,
those two, and maybe mobile or iPads in the
uh-huh,
future. We're not really
uh-huh.
sure about those two, but it's going to be a laptop or a desktop game.
All right, sounds good. And what about Unreal Engine? What is that about? I also don't know about it.
Yes, yes. Unreal Engine is possibly the number one tool to create video games.
Mm.
It's for AAA studio. I don't know you heard of AAA before.
I'm not a video game person.
No, it's okay. AAA games are like the top quality, highest quality game
Mm,
out
mm,
there. Like Grand Theft Auto. That sounds weird, but Grand Theft Auto, Call of Duty, Resident Evil. That most likely they use Unreal Engine to create it. Unreal Engine is uh, it's almost like a full stack tool for developers to create, and it's a blend of a game engine plus movie editing, animation
wow.
editing tool
Uh,
plus graphic editing tool. It's like two, three different tools combined into one thing.
that sounds like powerful. That must be paid, right?
It's very powerful. Yeah, and those games I mentioned above, like Grand Theft Auto, Call of Duty, they spend like minimum $50 million to create a
Ooh.
game. Minimum, and they use that tool,
Uh-huh,
and that's the tool they
uh-huh.
use. Yeah, and Unreal Engine is very powerful, and we use that. And Unreal Engine is very cool. Is that it's beginners friendly all the way to expert friendly.
Mm-hmm,
So what that means is that they have two ways to create games.
mm-hmm.
One is called Blueprint, and one is called C++.
Uh,
And Blueprint is it's a no code solution for people that doesn't know any C++ to create a game.
mm-hmm,
You, they use nodes or blocks, whatever you want to call it. Well, they call it nodes. I call it
uh-huh.
blocks. They already have pre-existing code written out, and you can just type out. You can just pull off the nodes into the screen, and you can create game logics, programming logics using these
Mm-hmm.
nodes. You create a game with zero codes at all. You don't need to learn programming to create games.
So on the RPG Maker, it's like a bit art, something more simple. With Unreal
Yes.
Engine, I believe it's more
Mhm.
realistic. Out of the, I mean, it starts like on the basics. You can do like very
Yeah.
basic stuff as
You can do whatever you
all
want
right.
with a neural engine.
That,
I'm very basic 8 bits old school Nintendo game from the 70s. You can do it, or you can do very futuristic
mhm.
games. Okay.
And what
Yeah.
what
Like
what is the path for your video game?
currently our video game is that on the graphics side, we want to make it um, Chinese inspired, very heavily Chinese inspired with 3D like. Well, it's kind of hard to explain. It's kind of similar to a game called Okami.
Hmm.
Okami is a Japanese game. They are technically a 3D game, but in a way they can portray traditional Japanese art in a 3D space. And we want to do that in a Chinese painting and Chinese art style in a 3D space. That's what we want to achieve.
Hmm. It's
Yeah.
and what about the arts, like the art pieces? You can use it freely. Is it like a public domain, or it's something you will need to pay to use, or you can do some modifications and have it
Yeah.
as
So
you
with
go?
the art pieces, we haven't gone. So what we want to do is create everything from
Hmm.
scratch and in-house as much as possible because this is our passion. So with that, yeah, we haven't ventured too far using third party pieces or original pieces at the moment.
Hmm. And what about monetization? What are you thinking about it? Is it gonna be subscription based? Is it gonna be something like you sell it once? How is that?
So what we want to do is that we want to release the first chapter for free,
Hmm.
and we are contemplating different routes that we're going to. Possibly a subscription looking type of game, um, or yeah, well, that's the only thing we're looking down. We possibly do a one thing that you can just buy the whole game outright,
Hmm.
but we want to continue making stories after
Uh-huh.
stories. So we might look at the subscription
So it's
side.
intended for end user, not for like schools, for example, or it can be
At the
both.
moment, yes, it's intended for
Hmm.
consumers, but we might look down into selling it to schools,
Hmm.
that channel, because we talked to over 20 professors, teachers, and school administrators, and they think this could be a tool for the younger
Hmm.
generations uh, to play, to learn culture on the side,
Hmm.
while they're learning language as a main
Hmm.
course, and during their homework time or their off time, they can play this game
Uh-huh.
to pick up different part of Chinese culture.
Instead of wasting time on social networks, right?
Yeah, and that's the argument we want to. Yeah.
I get it. Well, I think I kind of understand your mission through the conversation, but that would be great to hear your thought about it. Like if you have to write on the walls of your office your mission, have you thought about that? Do you have an idea?
the Our mission, I mean, we haven't thought that far. How do we what's a mission? I think going back to the original one-liner description is that we want to create
Hmm.
games that can educate people or help people to improve
Hmm.
themselves. I guess that's our mission.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty much what as we talk, I'm building the blocks here and kind of putting things together, and yeah, that's what I understood. So that sounds great. And why did you pick this idea to work on at first? Are you
Yeah,
like passionate by history, by arts? What is your?
yeah. Well, there are a few reasons. Um, well, when 3 to 4 months ago, I met my co-founder
Hmm.
Chris, and him and I talked about lots of
Hmm.
ideas, and we talked about AR games, AR language learning, and all this type of stuff. And we decided to go down the route. He wants to do a language learning. Him and I at first want to do language learning with video game, and then it proved that it's kind of hard and it's not fun enough if it's focused on learning. Um, so we pivoted a little bit to go all the way to entertainment. Let's just do a video game that is historically history and cultural
Hmm.
rich. So it help people to have fun and then absorb the knowledge passively, and that's why we picked it. And it was a lot easier because I myself is Chinese.
Hmm.
We're contemplating between Japanese and Chinese,
Hmm.
and neither of us know Japanese.
Hmm.
Besides, Chris knows a little bit of Japanese, and he loves Japanese
Uh-huh.
animation. And then, but the problem is we don't understand the Japanese culture that well. But I understand Chinese culture well
Uh-huh.
enough, so we solidified the plan to do to focus on Chinese culture.
All right. Well, I'm sorry. It's gonna be like a question that will go more to the personal side. Feel free
Sure.
not to answer if you don't want, but
Yeah.
I don't feel any accent. So it means you were probably born or raised here in the U.S. because you speak
Well,
perfectly.
Oh, thank you. Well, I wasn't born here in the States. I moved here to the States when I was 14 from
All
Hong
right.
Kong. And I moved to a very small town called Yuba City in Northern
Mhm.
California. It's a, well, I call it a town. People call it a city. Because I was from Hong Kong, right? There were 7 million people. Anything smaller than that, that's how I tell people. Yeah, we moved to a small city called Yuba City. It's an hour north of Sacramento, and at the time it only had 30,000 people. So, as you can imagine, from 7 million people, we moved to all the way to 30,000 people. Farm town, lots of orchards,
Mhm.
lots of
Mhm.
farms at the time. And I gotta be honest, I was probably the handful of Asian people in that school,
Mhm.
in the school.
Mhm.
Handful, maybe 10 people at most.
Uh-huh.
And most of them are born and raised second or third generation Asian.
Uh-huh.
So I was the only foreigner
Uh-huh.
there. So I was quickly integrated and assimilated in the American culture. So I picked up English very rapidly.
I
Yeah.
see. Yeah, I can understand now. Yeah, and your family is still in Yuba City.
Sorry.
Bless you. You
Sorry.
are.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Your family is still in Yuba City?
Yeah, my parents are still in Yuba
Mm-hmm.
City. One of my sisters is still in Yuba City. Yeah.
All right. So you come to California eventually to visit, right?
Yeah, I go visit about twice a year
All right.
to
Uh-huh.
California. Yeah.
All right. Sounds.
I love I love Northern California. Northern California is very beautiful.
Yes, it is. That's where I am. I am in the neighborhood of San Francisco here. I mean, not really. I'm about 30 miles away from the city. It is
Yeah,
beautiful here.
very cool. What part?
I'm in Castro Valley. That's where I live.
Castro
Castro
Valley. Is
Valley.
that
It's
north?
East Bay. It's beside San Leandro, close to Oakland.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Cool.
close to
Very cool.
Oakland. What out of your project, your game,
Mhm.
what wakes you up like at night? Things that that spark that comes out of the blue. Do you have those?
I'm very interesting person, so to
Uh,
speak. I live like an old person. So what happened is that I don't sleep late. I sleep very early. I sleep around 8 p.m. or
wow.
8:30
Uh-huh.
p.m. Yeah. Every night I take two melatonin
Uh,
and just knock myself out to sleep, and I wake up at somewhere around 4 a.m. or 4:30
uh-huh.
a.m. every morning,
Uh-huh.
and I go to gym. So I don't think a lot of things keep me up at night. I told myself is that, well, there's nothing I can do if things that keep me up at
Mm-hmm.
night. I'll just hit the hay, go to sleep, and next day I'm very functional. I'm happy. I'm energetic, and then I'll go fix the problem after that.
All right, so let me
That's
let me change let me change the question a little bit. What keeps you going during the day? You know
oh yeah,
what pumps you up?
yeah. What pumps me up is it's well, there are a few things. Um, getting well, how do I say this? One is I get to share my idea with people
Mm,
and listen to the
mm-hmm,
feedback. Um, because one person's idea and mine is so limited, right? Um, but getting to talk to people and getting their idea really inspires me, and that's how I feed off my energy,
mm-hmm.
you know. So there's that. That's very that get me going. So like I try to talk to one stranger a day, either on LinkedIn or on email. I go out and talk to
Uh,
people, find one or two people every day
ah,
to share my idea. So that get me going.
that's interesting.
And another thing is I'm very opposite at the same time. And when I'm not talking to people, I would rather stare on my computer
Yeah.
screen and program.
So that's your life, huh? You are like a programmer. Of course, you mentioned at the very beginning, like the boot camp and everything. So that's what
Yeah.
your career is, full on. Like, and what languages do you like more? What do you deal with?
A programming
Yes.
language? Yeah. Um, yes, I was trained in Ruby and in
Mm,
JavaScript. I mean, after a few years, you'll pick up other languages on the side really easily, right? But I'm I'm a hardcore Ruby fan. A lot of people would disagree or dislike
uh-huh,
Ruby, the
uh-huh,
language, but Ruby is such an elegant language that you know other languages can't provide.
uh-huh.
So there's that. I really like Ruby.
I'm a developer as well, but I'm
Mhm.
new. Um, if you
Cool.
noticed in the introduction of this conversation, I mentioned that I left like a senior engineer position early last year, and I used to deal with programming, but for industrial automation machines, which is a different
Mm,
world. It's
yeah,
a completely different perspective.
electric engineer. Yeah.
Yeah, it's automation, industrial automation engineer. Um, and then early last year, I left, and I that's when I started dealing with you know traditional programming languages, and in my case, it's Java, Kotlin
Mm,
for Android,
yep.
JavaScript. So I'm not, of course, I've seen a lot of things about Ruby around, but I've never really dealt with it. Can you talk a little
Yeah.
bit about Ruby? What is it good for? What do you build with it? Because I know like
Well,
JavaScript is good for web, right?
mhm.
And Kotlin for Android and other things as well, but it's what it's famous for. It's mostly for Android.
Yeah. So Ruby has a design philosophy,
Mm,
and that design philosophy is that make the program that you're coding as simple as possible. What that means is that it's oriented for
mm,
developers. It's not really oriented for the computer itself. So that's why it's when people said Ruby is so elegant, is that you can write Ruby and you can enjoy writing the code and you can enjoy not having dealing with a lot of syntax problem.
mhm.
Not dealing with a lot of stereotypical programming in the situations. It's almost like plain English.
Huh.
It's very elegant. It's very easy to write. So Ruby especially what got Ruby famous is Ruby on Rails,
Yes. Uh-huh.
developed by DHH. I forgot his full name,
Mhm.
but his short name is DHH. He works for Bootcamp. Is that the is the It's a company called Bootcamp or something? I forgot.
Uh,
Don't get
Not really sure.
Yeah, don't quote me on
No
that
problem.
one. Uh, but yeah, oh, Basecamp.
Basecamp. All
Sorry,
right.
Basecamp.
Uh-huh.
It's a project management tool, I believe. Yeah, DHH, him and his team developed Ruby on Rails about 10, 12 years ago, a little bit more than that, 15
Mhm.
probably. And it was one of the first full stack framework for web out
Oh.
there. MVC, they popularized MVC.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there's one more framework out there that started it, but they're the one that popularized it because they use such a simple, elegant
Huh.
language to create the framework. And it was the go-to framework and language in Silicon Valley for almost a
Oh
decade.
wow.
Airbnb, Shopify were developed in Ruby and Ruby on
Uh-huh.
Rails. So a lot of e-commerce or marketplace companies were started on Ruby on Rails.
Interesting. That's interesting because some of the adjectives you use to talk about Ruby, I also heard about Python. Does
Yeah.
that Are you familiar with Python as well? Is that any similarity? Anything?
Yeah, Ruby and Python. I read some Python code. I and wrote some a few
Hmm.
years ago. I'm not too familiar with Python. I do know is that what I hear from the creator of Ruby, Mats, um, he what did he say about about Python? I don't think he mentioned much about Python. He just mentioned a lot when he was creating the code. He just wanted to make it very easy for developer to write code. He didn't want it to be a problem to configure a lot
Yeah.
of things for uh, convention over
Uh-huh.
configuration, and he didn't want configuration to be boggled down. So there's that. Yeah, so I can't comment too much on Python. All I know is that Python is really great for writing good dynamic code for a lot of data
Mm-hmm.
oriented
Yeah. Yeah.
software.
Well, that's interesting. I'm now curious to learn more about Ruby. I'll take a look eventually. So, and but let me get back to your game. You
Mhm.
talked. You mentioned actually. You talk with strangers every single day, and that's your process
Mhm.
of acquiring users.
Mhm. Yeah.
What is your approach? Do you cold message people? Do you what? How do you pick like a person to speak with?
Yeah. So what I do, what I mostly focus my time on is in LinkedIn.
Mm,
I use LinkedIn and yeah, it's just cold message. What I do is I type in the search bar on LinkedIn, I search
uh-huh.
Chinese. And then whoever knows Chinese or has a degree in Chinese or whatever, I just hit them up. I was like, hey, I'm creating a video game to help
Mm.
people learn Chinese culture. You want to hop on a call? And then I just scheduled a call with them.
And what
So I
is
did.
the percentage of people that get back to you? Like, is it like high percentage of or
I would say around 20 to
20 to
30%
30?
of
Yeah,
people
that's
reply and schedule
mm-hmm,
meeting with
mm-hmm.
me. Pretty high, I would say.
That's interesting
Yeah.
because with my own project, my sister and my sister is who helps me on the marketing side of
Yeah.
my project. We are doing a similar approach, but we do talk with people on Instagram. So
Yeah.
Zip Stage,
Hmm.
my my project um, is music related. So we kind of go to people who follow and who engage with
Hmm.
like voice instructors, with music instructors,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
we kind of code message them and say is very similar to what you do. It's like, I'm building this.
Hmm.
Would you be interested? And the feedback is also about 20%. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's a very uh, a
Yeah. Very cool.
consistent number. That's a consistent number. Um, is there? Well, you have been working on Intervallum Studio for not so long, right? It's been a few months, correct?
Yeah. Hmm.
Have you been able to notice anything that you can tell this was my expectation and this is the reality? Like, did you can you give us any example?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the expectation is that at first I thought it was a lot easier to get into schools, and then talked to a few people that are in schools, that administrators. I was lucky to get talk to the co-founder of Learning Rabbit or the Learning
Mm,
Company from the
mm,
70s, and she created Reader's Rabbit. It was another reading game that kids and parents loved during the 70s, 80s, and
mm,
early 90s. Um, and to this day, um, her name is Anne McCormick. She's 80 years
mm,
old now, and she's still creating uh, reading and learning related video games for parents and kids. And she told me that schools are very hard to get into. And school has like almost an 80 and 20% budget. 80% they focus on learning, like school learning, education related, and 20% is supplementary. And with our idea, it's only school will only use that 20%. So that means they're very careful of using that budget. And it's very hard because Mind Game is really
Mm-hmm.
entertainment
Mm-hmm.
focused rather than, hey, you need to hit a certain curriculum. You need to get the curriculum right. You need to get the learning
Mm-hmm.
objective right. You have to work with schools
Mm-hmm.
closely. And we are not
Uh-huh.
doing any of that. We're doing a fun game that help people to
Uh-huh.
learn, not a learning curriculum that has a
And that's
video
probably
game.
why you are targeting more end user versus the schools directly, right?
Yes. And our goal is to target end users, target consumer, and collect data and show it to schools and saying, hey, these people actually learned
Mm-hmm.
something new. And we can quantify, we can make sense of these learning data. And it's like, could we turn that into can we marry that into a
Mm-hmm.
school curriculum?
Mm-hmm.
That's like a few years down the road. And that's kind of like what Minecraft did. Minecraft is another game. It's an
Yeah.
open world game. You can build and hack and do
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want in Minecraft. And I think it was like 7 or 10 years into it, they started an educational branch that they figure out, oh, they can teach programming. They can teach games. They can teach curriculum related stuff in
Mm-hmm.
Minecraft. So that's kind of like the route that we
Huh,
want to tap
that's
into.
interesting. And once you talk to users, you consider that like being like a user, a potential user, or you kind of have in the back of your mind that this person you talked with today um,
Mhm.
is a person who you certainly use your product. What is your feeling when you talk to a different person?
Can you say
Yes,
that question
absolutely.
again?
I'm sorry for that.
Yeah.
Um,
No, you
so once you go and talk with people every single day,
go.
and
Yeah.
then of course you put them on your database, and I believe you save their email or something to get in contact, right?
Yeah.
Based on my own experience, it's like a lot of people who will tell you that your project or your product is super good, they will
Mhm.
likely never return and eventually just say they have no time for this. So what is your, when you put this person on your database or you save the name or the email, what is your feeling? Do you feel like this person will be a user for sure? Are you expecting this person to be a user for sure? Or you are considering that this person is a potential interested but not necessarily a user that will turn into a real world user of your product? It's
Yeah.
confusing.
Well,
I'm sorry for that.
I think I
Uh,
get what you're trying to say. I think is that let me rephrase it. How do I tell the person I'm talking to is the the potential user that want to use my app, my
yeah.
game,
What
right?
the?
How do I filter
Mm-hmm,
them
yeah.
out? Yeah. Um, I hope that that's the that your answer. I'll try to answer it and tell me if you want me to go
Sure.
deeper
Uh-huh.
or change it. So the way I figure it out is that at the initial stage, when I talk to people and it's like, hey, I'm creating a video game. This is what it is. I just hit them up, and some people would like to hijack the
Mm.
conversation. They're like, this is what you should do. You should do this. You should
Yes.
do that. And I was like, immediately, I know that they're not
Mm-hmm.
interested.
Mm-hmm.
And people that tell you this is what
Uh-huh.
you should do without listening to your whole like part your the core of
Uh-huh.
your story, they're
Yes.
not interested. They just want to be interested to control the
Mm-hmm.
conversation
Mm-hmm.
or your idea. So immediately I just kick them. Like my mind is just like, nope, they're out, and then I try to end the
Uh-huh.
conversation early. That's one thing. And then another thing is that I the I think that I know that early at what I'm looking for is really early adopters. Early adopters that are very passionate about the
Mm-hmm.
idea. So what I've seen is that people that are exceptionally passionate about this idea is that they get so excited. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I would love to play a game like this. I love
Mm-hmm.
playing games. I love learning other culture." And they can just literally imagine it and finish my sentence. If they can imagine it and finish my sentence, they cut me off. They're like, "Oh, this is what you wanted to do," and they just keep on
Uh-huh.
talking. And it's like, wait, that's exactly
Uh-huh.
what I wanted to do. That's how I know that person is
Wow,
passionate about
that's a
my idea.
magical moment, huh? I have those.
Yeah,
Yes, I know how it feels.
yeah,
It is
yeah.
it is really good. And what is your plan for this person? Like, uh, are you preparing like a marketing or some email campaigns? What is your plan moving forward? Like for this kind of people?
Yeah. So with what happened is that with these kind of people, one of the good things that gaming, it's very different than other software. Game has a culture
Mm-hmm.
behind it. You know, if you develop game, you have to develop the culture. That's not just the company's culture, but the culture of the
Mm-hmm.
game
Mm-hmm.
itself. So those people are the early adopters, and what happened is that they have their own thing. So what happened is that I open up everything to them. Well, as everything as possible, like the story idea, the animation idea, and I just ask for their
Mm-hmm.
feedback and ask for
Mm-hmm.
their help to make the
Uh-huh.
story better or to make the
Mm-hmm.
animation better. And they what happened is that we have a handful of people who are so passionate about this idea. They like we meet up about two times
Mm-hmm.
a month and they go into our story and go into our progress and they help us translate certain
Oh,
parts
that's
of the
powerful. So
game
people are
because
already
they,
engaged with your process.
they're very engaged. They're like, oh, this phrase, this story in here, this paragraph, you can use this Chinese idioms, or you can use this Chinese culture or this Chinese art in this
Mm-hmm.
part of the game. Or they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like let's make it more descriptive. So they put in more
Uh-huh.
notes for us.
Oh, that's super powerful.
So
Congratulations. If you
yeah,
reach that point
yeah, thank
where
you.
potential users are already helping you to build your
Yep,
product, it's powerful. So congratulations. That's great.
very, very powerful.
Yes.
Yeah. And what we've seen is that game is very different in another sense is that they're different than traditional software is that technically doing a game, especially a role-playing game like ours, we're doing three different products
Mm-hmm.
at the same time. One is a story. A role-playing game needs a pretty
Uh-huh.
good story, um, especially a single-player game needs a pretty good story to keep people hooked. Um,
Mm-hmm.
That's one. Another thing is the front end. What we call the front end is really the animation
Uh-huh.
and the graphics. The graphic
Oh,
has to be
yes. Uh-huh.
convincing or very
Mm-hmm.
stylized. And the third is the mechanics. The mechanics have to make sense, which is back end, really. So these three things have to be really good and it has to be married together really well, or the game will fall apart. Unlike traditional software, you can go without the front end really well and still make the app
Yes.
functioning,
Uh-huh.
and people can
Mm-hmm.
still use it. Um, but not in video game. Video game has to be these three product, especially our game has to be. We have to do right on these three
That's
things.
correct. But you have it sounds like you have an advantage over some other games. It's like you don't necessarily need to build a network around your game, right? It's like a single person game as a traditional game where I
Yep.
used to play from home, no internet necessary. Like you play, it's your
Sure.
game, right? So you don't have this
Yep.
need of people to be connecting inside the game to build
Yep.
this network around it,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. So good side and the downside of that is the good side is we can really focus on the core
Mm-hmm.
and the heart. and the soul of the
Mm-hmm.
consumer, right? Because the story is so, we want to write a really, really good story, and it's a single player, so we can drill it down with the story side. The downside is that on the business side, every business wants a network
Mm-hmm.
effect. They want to have multiplayer. So the multiplayer side would be getting more, because more people create a community so they can
Mm-hmm.
earn more money,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's network. So the good side is how deep that we can go as a
Mm-hmm.
single player game. The downside is that uh, we might not be able to get hundreds and thousands of people playing this game at
Mm-hmm.
the same time. So it's not uh, the goal of this game is influencing each and in each individual rather than influence the
Mm-hmm.
mass. We don't want to create a game that is so generic that everybody
Yes.
could play and they just
Mm-hmm.
grind through the game. We want a game that can touch
Uh,
someone's heart. It's a passion game.
and
Yeah, game for
that's
passion.
interesting.
Yeah.
But once you have, let's say, 1,000 users, then you can start thinking about creating some connection inside with the users you already have, so you don't depend on them to start something from scratch, right? So you already
Mhm.
have some traction and start moving. That's powerful. Uh,
Yeah.
and you talked about a lot about storytelling inside the game, right?
Yeah.
How you want to tell the
Yep.
story. Um,
Mhm.
have you ever thought like a little farther? Like, can you translate this video game into something, into like a cartoon or into like a book, or you never thought that
Oh,
far?
like merchandising
Well,
the
if you
game.
think like
No.
Resident Evil, for example, there was like a movie launched a few months ago, right? Is
Yeah.
do you dream?
Yeah,
Do you
we have
have this crazy dream?
that
Mm-hmm.
sounds cool. Like creating merchandise like toys or figurines or movies or cartoon. I mean, it sounds very cool. We haven't thought of that
Mm-hmm.
far yet. Um, yeah, we haven't thought of that far. That's to me, that's almost like a pipe dream because I don't think anyone intended for that
Yeah.
at the beginning.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so
Yeah, that's good. It just keeps your feet on the floor, right? It's like grounded, stay grounded, and it's good. I just wanted
yeah.
to check. It's important. And going back to Intervallum Studio, who builds what? I know you are two people, right?
Yes, yes.
And how do you guys share duty? What is the?
Yeah, so my co-founder, he is so what happened is that he loves animation, he loves the graphic side of things, so he's focusing more on that. The graphics and the story writing, he's focusing on that part. I'm focusing on the game logic. I'm writing the game. I'm doing the back end side of things. So he actually had
Mm-hmm.
more work
Mm-hmm.
than I do. I focus on the game logic. I
Mm-hmm.
talk to the people. I deal with the business. He does all the graphics, all the animation, all the 3D modeling, and all the front end
Uh,
of the game. Uh,
and the front end is designed on the Unreal. What is the name again? Unreal Engine.
Unreal Engine.
Yes.
Yeah. So all the front end stuff is actually designed in the a tool called
Oh,
Blender.
Blender. There we go. All right.
Yeah, Blender is a animation tool. I don't know
Uh,
much about it. Yeah, the game logic. So what happened is that he's designing all the
mm-hmm.
front end. I'll just call
Uh-huh.
design all the front end stuff, and I'm designing the game logic. Once his front end stuff is over, we're gonna pull all the front end stuff and put it inside or on top
Uh,
of our back end stuff. That's a very simple way to say it. So yeah,
yeah.
that's
So
the
now
goal.
it's my turn to talk about a product that's not Intervallum Studio. We mentioned Blender, right? And
Yeah.
you don't deal with Blender a lot. I have started learning Blender recently,
Cool. Very
And
cool.
it's just for fun. I created like a little animation for Zip Stage, which is my company, and
Mhm.
I just wanted to have fun. And then I just got fascinated by how powerful it is, and started watching movies on YouTube and like people teaching how to deal with it. So Blender is a software where you can create 2D and 3D animations in a very sophisticated way. There are a lot of filters, a lot of tools. It's open source, so it's completely free. There are no, yeah, no charge at all. So it's powerful.
Mhm.
It's amazing. I like it, and it's nice to hear that you guys are using it because it is powerful. And yeah, at some point I'd like to kind of get more familiar with it and really build something cool out of it, but it's just future plans for now.
Yeah,
I'm
very
not
cool.
sure if you mentioned this, and I apologize if you did. Are you a video game person yourself?
Yeah, I do play video game. I try to play some video game about 30 minutes
All
to an
right.
hour a day. Just to, yeah. Um, I I like the very traditional
Mm,
RPG game, especially Japanese ones or
mm,
Chinese ones, because I really felt like they're very
mm,
story focused. Um, to me, story it's more important or just as important as the game itself. Um, I'm okay with if the game mechanics are
mm,
very simple, because it's yeah, that's what I like. But at the same time, I do like shooting games, so I play a lot of Counter
mm,
Strike Go. It's a very simple
uh-huh.
shooting game. So there's that. Those two are the things I really
That's
like to play.
interesting.
Yeah.
And have you ever built a game before? It's your
Nope. This is our
first
first
venture, huh?
attempt. Yep.
And how are you
Yep.
feeling about it? I mean, do you, when you decided to do it, did you feel lost, or you kind of immediately got the path and you kind of understood what you needed to do?
Yeah. I think since this is our first attempt, we are just kind of learn things on
Mm-hmm.
the fly. But one thing that we do know is that since this is a very
Mm-hmm.
entertaining game, uh, so with startup, right, with companies, there's a spectrum. Um, one is entertaining and social, and one is very practical. You know, it solves a problem. There's a problem,
Mm-hmm.
we solve it. And there's a thing is that let's go entertaining. Let's put
Mm-hmm.
some popcorn
Mm-hmm.
on your laps
Mm-hmm.
and watch a movie. That type of startup is very hard to start. It's high risk, high reward. And what happens that we've seen is that we get little
Mm-hmm.
support from the Utah entrepreneur
Mm-hmm.
community. So it's a hard thing to do because it's a
Mm-hmm.
video game. Not a lot of investors or people would like to would like to do something
Mm-hmm.
like this because it's
Yeah, and it
risky.
it necessarily needs to keep growing, right, forever. It's not something you can build today and
Yeah,
just sit down and enjoy it, right?
yeah, and it's constantly we need to build it. We need to do
Mm-hmm.
things right, um, and it's hard for them to wrap their
Mm-hmm.
head around it because there's not a problem. If you're not in the in certain industry, if you clearly present a problem, you get it. I can get it, and you clearly present a solution. I get it. But you telling people that, oh, I want to create a video game that have people learn. They're like, wait, what is that
Uh-huh.
supposed to mean? They can't
Uh-huh.
conceptualize it. Most
Yeah,
people can't.
I understand.
Yeah.
And what about
Yeah.
the Utah startup scenario that you just mentioned? Are you part? Do
Yeah.
you go like to have meetings and things, or it's something you just watch from far? How is that? How does that work?
I occasionally go to some of the entrepreneurship events and
Uh-huh.
stuff like that. Utah is very famous for business
Mm.
to business
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
software, SaaS,
Mm-hmm.
B2B. We're not famous for consumer. Uh, we're famous for B2B software or hardware, like that
Mm-hmm.
type of stuff.
Right. And do they
Partly, yeah.
provide any support, mentorship, any investment?
They
How is
do.
that?
We have, yeah, we have. So Chris and I met through a startup
Mm,
class. We went to a private class that's done by a renowned Utah
mm-hmm,
angel investor here in Utah, and his name is
mm-hmm,
John Richards, and he started a boot camp, like a 3 day lean startup
mm-hmm,
entrepreneurship
mm-hmm,
course. It was very immersive, and he taught us everything. Well, not everything, as much as possible
mm-hmm,
about startup. And Chris and I met through that event, and John is a great mentor and advisor on our
mm-hmm,
side. Uh, but we're looking for people that knows the game industry in the ins
mm-hmm,
and out of it to be our
mm-hmm.
advisor. So point us to more better direction because this is our first
Yeah.
time.
Do you know where to find those people, like in the gaming industry? Is it like on the East Coast, on the West Coast? Do you have an idea?
It's
On the
mostly on the
West.
West Coast. West Coast is very consumer
Uh-huh.
based. A lot of game studio are in
Mm-hmm.
LA or in
Mm-hmm.
San Francisco, because LA is the heart of
Mm-hmm.
entertainment
Mm-hmm.
capital, right? So it's in the West Coast, and we're looking. Um, we haven't found anyone yet because we're slowly looking, and we want to. What we want is we want to find investors and advisors after we create a
Mm-hmm.
playable demo. We want to really
Of
understand the
course.
users first because we don't want to get hijacked by investors to tell us what to do. We want to figure out, okay, this is what the users want, and let's focus on what the
Mm-hmm.
user wants, and then we look for. Now we know, right? Now we know the accuracy of our app or of our game. Then we go out and find advisors and or
That's excellent.
investors.
Good point. Yes,
Yeah,
that's really important.
yeah,
So, Ben, we just crossed 1 hour conversation.
sure, yeah,
Is there any question or any topic you would like to talk about that we have not touched yet?
yeah. I think part of it is that we touched a little bit about we are about
Mm-hmm.
Intervallum Studio, and the other part is, well, going back to it, um, is that Intervallum Studio currently we're trying to do part-time web or mobile development to fund our game,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. Because what we found out is that our runway is a
Mm-hmm.
lot shorter. Runway is
Yes.
always shorter than
Yes.
you expected. So we found that out, and we decided to take on web development or mobile
Mm-hmm.
development to
Mm-hmm.
fund the game. And that's something about entrepreneurship is that you don't know what's going to happen, and especially we want to keep this game as pure as possible. So the first stage we wanted to make sure it's our game and our users game, not some big studio or big
Mm-hmm.
publisher's game. So we're trying to fund the
Yeah.
first
Mm-hmm.
part of the game ourselves.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's a very good strategy. Congratulations. I mean, of course, that would be great if you could just sit down and work full time on your video game, but it's
Yeah.
usually
Right.
not the case, right? So yeah, good job. I have a question for us to wrap this conversation. Is we both met on Y Combinator Startup School, correct?
Yeah.
And I would like to ask you about Startup School.
Sure.
What do you think about it? How much do you believe it helps you? The content. Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
it?
So I so talk about startup school. Startup school is great. It's a free tool for people that doesn't know anything about startups. They should take it. Um, the thing about it, let's take a step back about the startup school. I think about a lot of people have an entrepreneurial dream. They want to create a big business like the next Facebook or next Instagram or whatever it is, and they just go head on and create the app or to create the hardware that they
Mm-hmm.
want to sell, but they didn't think about what about the users? What do they really are looking for? What are the nitty gritty details of raising money? Um, People don't think
Mhm.
about that first. People think about let's get an office, let's just build a product and sell,
Yes.
sell, 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 sell. But what are the foundation of the company? And those are startup school provides a overview of the foundation. I don't think they drill in very deep of it. Luckily, John Richards, like the boot camp uh, instructor, he taught deeper than what startup school can
Hmm.
provide. Uh, so so going back to it is that startup school is really really good if you're a first time entrepreneur that knows nothing about businesses, especially I would say people that graduated in a business degree should go to startup school because business degree, what I've seen is that they learn how to run an existing successful business. They don't teach you how to start and lay the
You
foundation of
nailed
the
it.
business.
Yes.
Startup school teaches
Hmm.
that laying foundation and start a
Uh,
business from scratch. And people that wants to do it, please watch every single video in startup schools to get an understanding of it. It's frustrating that when I talk to other people, they don't know much about startup, and I was like, okay, crap. Now I have to
yes.
educate them
Uh,
what startup is and what's the difference between a startup and a business. They're totally different
and
things.
when you, I'll just take this opportunity. What about when you kind of tell like a friend or a family that you are working on a startup and then start coming with
Yeah,
all these questions, to questions and suggestions, and you just think like, oh, there we go. It's exactly what you mentioned, right? It's like, oh, there we
yeah,
go.
yeah,
I'll need to listen and to kind of just try to share what I know and whatever. Hopefully,
yeah,
they will understand. Um, so
yeah,
Ben, it has been great talking with you. You are my guest number two, so thank you so much for joining me. I like this conversation. I hope you could take something out of it as well, and I hope we'll have a chance to talk again soon. Maybe here again live to talk about the
yeah,
success of Intervallum Studio and your video game.
yeah. Well, thank you for that. This is a fun a podcast or a
Mhm.
call for me too. It's really cool that I can explain what I get to do, what I wanted to do with Intervallum, and have have you share it with everybody. Thank you for this opportunity.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So thank you. I'll talk with you soon.
Yeah.
You take care.
Alrighty.